Today, UCLA formally announced their next head coach of their football program, it being DeShaun Foster, who was the running backs coach, obviously was a running back at UCLA back in the day. I didn't know this until today, but a Hall of Fame guy from UCLA. He's in the UCLA Hall of Fame. Joe, your thoughts on DeShaun Foster being the next head coach? And let me ask you, I know you saw it, but the players really are excited that he is back and their head coach. But what do you think of the move of DeShaun Foster at UCLA?
I think there's two sides to this, and it's kind of crazy. We're at this point where we're talking about UCLA football on this show, and we're talking about it this seriously, and we spent a lot of time talking about Chip Kelly. I think the one side of this is the excitement for a guy like him coming back to the program, who was one of the better players in the program's history, was a decent player in the NFL, and is clearly very liked by the current roster, to the point where we all saw the video. They were extremely excited when he entered the room as the next head coach. They were all cheering. They rushed down to greet him. It is clear that this is a guy that the current roster can rally around, and more importantly, most of the guys are not going to leave because they're going to probably want to stick around and play for him. You can also remain and keep continuity with the current coaching staff. It's great to know that most of those guys aren't going to get screwed over and end up having to either be jobless or find a new job, take a year off, whatever it might have been. But I'm a little bit concerned because I don't think that this was the best option for them. He's never been a head coach. He's never been a play caller or a coordinator. I'm a bit wary of hiring guys that were position coaches that were former players for programs, because it doesn't always work out when you don't have enough experience to back it. I still firmly believe, Blake, that they should have hired DeLeone Lynn. I don't even know if they considered it. My whole point is that they had plenty of time to figure this out. They had a whole week if they wanted to, because it's not like they're competing for other candidates like other programs were. They could have sat and really looked at their options and figured this thing out. And I think if they did that, they would have hired DeLeone Lynn, who was a phenomenal defensive coordinator, and I think in the future is going to be a brilliant head coach. But this could work out. I don't think it was the best option on the table.
I think that this is a patchwork job, or they view it as a patchwork job.
Yeah.
I really am rooting for DeShaun Foster to be good at UCLA, because when you have that much buy-in from players, that means, and Joe, it wasn't just a position group. Like, dude, the entire team went nuts, okay, when he walked through that door.
Yeah.
And he was announced as the next head coach. It is a lazy hire. It is a very lazy hire. And I look at this and say to myself, what I want as a fan, okay, of college football is I like Cinderella stories. I like stories where, like, look, a lot of people are going to count them out. No one really expects them to do much. You have a guy that loves that program, clearly comes back and is trying to salvage UCLA football. But I got to admit, even though the players like it, and I'm glad that I thought we would argue on this, but I guess we won't. I just don't see the success. Okay, I don't see where they're going to have success. Now, Joe, I will say now, they do have some decent pieces on their roster. It's not as if that the cup is completely barren there.
Yeah.
Now, how much buy-in does he get from this team to where they put their head down, get to work, and he gets some wins that maybe he's not expecting to get? But they got to go, like, even in the non-conference, they got to go to Baton Rouge probably at night. They're not winning. Okay? Now, you can say I'm biased there because I cover LSU. They're not winning at night in Death Valley. It's not happening.
No.
Okay? Not with their current roster. Then they got a whole Big Ten schedule. I want him to succeed. I love it when – so let me give you an example. I love it when guys go home and try to salvage something in the program that they love the most. I want them to win. But hiring a guy like yours, Orgeron winning at LSU, Harbaugh winning at Michigan, Joe, those are so far in and far between. you could have Mario Cristobal in Miami. How's that going? Oh, by the way, Manny Diaz didn't work there either. Just because he's your guy and he's been there and he's been a running back there, had a great career in Carolina, had multiple years we had a couple 800-yard rush. I remember as a Saints fan, he used to kill us a lot of times. I hope he has success. Joe, I think this was laziness, pure laziness. And I don't think the UCLA fans, which I saw message board geniuses tweet this, they are not happy, nor should they be. Because, look, you're hiring a guy with zero experience and Joe, it would be one thing if they were still in the Pac-12. I would say to myself, hey, man, there's weird stuff that happens in the Pac-12. You have a brand new head coach that's never been a head coach trying to pioneer a completely different move into the Big Ten. Just don't think it's going to go over well. And we could be having a conversation a year from now that, look, man, it was a patchwork job. It really didn't work for him. And here we are.
That's the only part that I don't agree with. But it sounds like you and I have the same take here. That it's a feel-good opportunity here.
Feel-good story.
Right. And it is going to at least keep the current guys on the roster happy. Right? Like that is the worst thing that could happen if you're UCLA is to take way too long with this, which is more than a week, hire somebody that the current roster doesn't love, and then everybody jumps in the portal and leaves. That's the worst case scenario that could have happened, right?
Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
Because I've had, just to interrupt you, and I want you to interject on this. I've seen a lot of people say that, okay? Like, hey, you got to hire this guy now because you don't want the roster. Well, this is a 4-year decision now. This isn't just a 4-year decision. Why do you keep saying that?
I think there's a sweet spot, though. I think that this happens on Friday. They rushed, as I said earlier. This is rushed to try and make this move and make your hire by Monday after him leaving on Friday. That's too quickly. I think they have at least a week. I think that you've got at least a week to figure this thing out. I agree with you. I think that there is a right timing to not rush the process. Like, I actually think that the Sharon Moore move, that wasn't rushed. That was the right amount of timing. That it was, I believe it was Wednesday or so when it had happened. It wasn't over a weekend. They knew who they were going with, and the news came out a little earlier than it was supposed to, but it was still going to be an ongoing process. I just feel like, as you're talking about here, while it feels nice for UCLA football, it does feel like they're just going with the easiest option. And as you said, it's lazy. It is lazy to go with somebody who has no coaching experience that you know would immediately say yes. That's what it feels like. That's why I don't take it very seriously. Again, this could work out well, but this is not the type of guy that you want to be learning on the job. This isn't Marcus Freeman, where we knew he was a great recruiter and we knew that he was a brilliant defensive coach, and him learning on the job, I'm a little less scared of it because he's at least 3 steps ahead of a guy who was a position coach. A position coach to a head coach is a huge, huge jump. And I still stand by D'Anton Lynn would have been a better option because that is a proven guy who I think is the next up to be a great head coach. Or I would have even gone with David Shaw, whose son is on the roster. I think that if you were going to go in any other direction and try and get somebody quickly, either of those guys would have been better than Foster.
Joe, I got to be real with you. There are thousands of coaches that would have been better fits.
I don't know about thousands.
Okay.
We probably could have given. We probably could put together a list of like 5 to 7 guys that would have.
There are 25 head coaches somewhere else that would have taken the UCLA job that would have been better.
I think that's a little.
Joe, he's never called
a little too critical.
He's never been
I know.
a head coach.
I know.
Let me ask you this question. If any place, anywhere else, at any given moment hires a position coach to be their head coach, you would ridicule this worse than anything. What you can't do in coaching searches is, because it's a program that, it's just little old UCLA. You can't do that.
I don't disagree that there are options out there, but I'm not going to completely discredit him to the point where I'm going to say that there's a multitude of options at the lower levels that they could have gone with that were more qualified. I mean, again, Foster could end up being a good head coach in the future. There's a possibility, but it was too soon of a move.
I want him to succeed, but Joe, there's nothing in his tenure as a coach that would give me any faith that he can lead a program. Now, I think he could have a decent year one. I think because of that roster, he could have a decent year one. Now, here's what he's got to do to have success. Joe, there's only one thing he's got to do. You ready?
What?
Recruit. And I understand the limitations that he may have at UCLA. But let me tell you something about this game of football that we talk about so much. Joe, it's not that hard of a game. You could line up and run inside zone, and if you have better personnel, you're going to win. That's just a fact of football. Teams that run the football at an effective clip, you know why they win? It's not an innovative play call. Inside zone's not an innovative play call. This game is simple, and sometimes we make it not so simple. Now, Joe, can he recruit? Does he know the dynamic of recruiting? Now, he's a guy from North Carolina that went from North Carolina. Yeah, he is.
He's from Tustin.
Born in Charlotte, North Carolina.
But he went to high school in Tustin, California, which is
okay.
Orange County. So I was going to bring that up.
Right. Well, then I digress. If he's I just saw where he was born from, and it's in North Carolina, but from Tustin, California. Getting back to the point, though.
Yep.
He can come in there and recruit. And I will tell you, that's something that Chip did not do. How better? Let me ask you this. I do think that there's a scenario where he could be better, a little bit better, because he can get better personnel in there. I think it could be where the play calling and being a head coach is what he would have to learn on the job. He can instantly be a better recruiter than Chip was.
So that's where I'm optimistic, at the very least, that this thing could trend in a strong direction, but might take some time. I don't know what the rest of his coaching staff looks like. And I also, to be completely honest, I'm not going to be naive enough to just say he's probably a good recruiter because he's from the area. But it does make things easier, as we've seen in the history of college football. Guys that are from the relative area near the surrounding high schools. Tustin is in Orange County. It is near programs like St. John Bosco, Mater Dei. It's in rough range of that. It's near Los Angeles, all of where this hotbed of recruiting
Carson Palmer in the championship game I read.
Is that actually what it says on Wikipedia?
On his bio, he lost to Carson Palmer. How about that?
That's hilarious. But to this point, though, that is why I'm optimistic.
Losing to Carson Palmer.
He's got his number, apparently. I think that's why I'm a little bit more, as you were saying, that there's probably a lot more qualified guys. I think that's where there's at least a redeeming quality here, is that him as a recruiter, I can be optimistic that he understands the area. And that's one of the things that we've been most critical of Lincoln Riley of, is not recruiting the area well, because he's not a guy from California, and he clearly doesn't understand the values of having guys that are proud of being from the area. UCLA is a program that they could build a roster of guys that are excited to represent the state and represent the city.
Let me ask this question. How much can a former player get buy-in from a booster and fan base?
It could be a little easier than Chip, who clearly didn't care enough to do anything.
Who is an introverted guy who does not get along with a lot of people. Joe, this game is not as complex as we make it out to be.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Joe, I'm watching the Super Bowl last night, okay? The game-winning play to McCole Hardman is literally a rollout right receiver in flat called corn dog. Andy Reid's favorite play. He won this back-to-back Super Bowls with a play called corn dog. I mean,
is that really?
Yeah, it's literally what it's called. This game is not that difficult. No. Now, I would not be surprised if they had some success this year, to be honest with you, because I still think they got talent on that roster.
I'm not going to go that far. I mean, this is like a 6-7 win football team if everything goes like
I was going to say
perfectly.
8. I was going to say they could get to 8 wins. That would be their max.
I think they actually have a pretty tough schedule.
They do have a very tough schedule.
Just
You know who doesn't have a tough schedule in the Big Ten, by the way?
Who?
Your Rutgers Scarlet Knights.
12 in season for Rutgers.
Okay, first off, can we talk about something very quickly?
What?
Do you know how I know that the Mafia is they're fans of Rutgers? Can I tell you how I know this? Here's my
They obviously are. They obviously are.
Can I tell you why?
Why?
How did Rutgers miss on Oregon, Ohio State, and Michigan?
You're talking about their schedule? They can't get control over that.
I think that the Mafia.
You think Tony Patini, Mr. Italian last name, has ties to the mob? Is that what you're playing? That has to be the most ridiculous conspiracy theory that we've ever shared on this
Joe,
show.
they miss Oregon, Ohio State, and Michigan.
I think that is more of a reflection of the conference not wanting to waste good matchups and them giving them just a very favorable schedule.
What if they would have done that for Washington? What if Washington wouldn't have had to play Oregon, Ohio State, or Michigan?
Because that wasn't going to happen. Also, Rutgers just had home and homes, I believe, with a bunch of those teams that you just mentioned. They played Penn State, they played Michigan, they played Ohio State this past year. So the likelihood of them having to repeat and play any of those 3 teams that you just mentioned was unlikely. Hey, man, this is a 10-win year for old Rutgers football over in Piscataway, New Jersey. You better respect them.
I think that they're cheating.
Don't disrespect.
The Mafia is involved here. I'm full conspiracy theorist on Rutgers.
Don't do it. Don't disrespect
another Italian.
Don't disrespect Schiano. Don't
you
do
got
that.
4 Italians in a room. What's there and says, I don't want to play Oregon, Michigan, or Ohio State, and it gets granted.
He is an American hero. He is a fearless leader, and he is the greatest thing to happen to the state of New Jersey. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.